PowerPlayChess, brought to you in association with Kagi. It's getting hot at the top of the Tata Steel Masters. Here's my pick from round 10. Nodirbek Abdusattorov against Alexey Sarana. So Sarana having a pretty good tournament, playing solidly, lots of draws and one win. Abdusattorov second going into this round and fighting for first prize. E4, C5, and it goes into an open Sicilian. So the gloves are off, and in fact a Najdorf variation. While I'm always interested in the Najdorf, an opening I used to play a lot, and I like the flexibility of playing A6 because sometimes you play E5, one of my favourite pawn structures. Sometimes you play E6. Sometimes you don't even touch that E pawn at all and just go G6. Abdusattorov plays knight B3. Now that is unusual. I mean, there are so many moves that white has in this position, but it's preempting E5. And if E5 hit, then white can claim that, yeah, this has gained some time, basically. I think if I were black here, I might consider just playing G6, actually. But E6 can't be bad. So it's a normal Scheveningen position. But the knight has voluntarily moved away from the centre. But Abdusattorov very quickly plays G4. So this is a kind of Kerr's attack with white having the knight on B3. So B5, trying to get counterplay. And A3 stops the pawn advancing. Bishop B7, bit of pressure here, and Bishop G2. Yeah, I quite like this setup with the bishop on G2, protecting this one, and then you just get going on the king side. So that's what happens here. H4, and of course this is quite dangerous for black. If black wants to castle king side, then, well, actually potentially F4, F5 is quite nasty actually. But sometimes just H5 and G6 as well. So black gets going on the queen side, rook C8. I like this move. Queen E2. Okay, solid. I mean, don't know, it feels right actually just to go for it with F4, but okay, Queen E2 is just sort of puts the brakes on for a moment. Bishop E7 and F4. And yeah, this is a moment where black could castle, but you know, you have to be ready for moves like F5 or, you know, possibly H5 as well. But H6 I think is far more sensible from Sarana, because white's king is actually a little bit vulnerable. If it goes to the queen side, then black is ready to open the position with B4. If it stays in the middle, well, there's a big hole behind those pawns and the rooks are split. So I like H6 actually. I mean, I think Bishop E3 would be my choice here, and just keep options open. And it covers an important diagonal. But incredibly, Abdusattorov, after 13 minutes, played castle's kingside. That is a very brave move, because after Sarana exchanged on G5, then that king must feel a bit drafty on G1. Just needs a check here, a killer check, and the king's in trouble. Now at the moment Queen B6 is nothing, of course, because of Bishop E3, but that king is quite exposed with those advanced pawns. Knight B6 looks very reasonable. You want to put the knight on C4. And, you know, white's attack for the moment is going nowhere. I mean, really, for this attack to succeed, you know, these pieces need to come into play. I mean, F5 just doesn't get anywhere. Just gives up that pawn. I mean, white is just not in a position to attack at the moment. Black's king is actually quite secure. So for me, this was a big surprise, casting kingside. A4. Well, somehow Abdusattorov needs to stir things up. He needs to get some play. It's not happening on the king side. Now here the computer likes b4 and then putting the knight back on d7. I mean, this is really hard to understand. You know, this knight can bounce around. I mean, it just looks very double-edged to me. But it's kind of interesting, that's the suggestion. But Sarana played what, to my eyes, is a very human move. He plonked the knight on the outpost. An exchange on b5. Now, watch out for knight b5, because then queen b6, check, and the knight drops. So queen f2 covers the diagonal. Okay, that looks very reasonable to me. The king needs a bit of protection. So b4 pushes the knight. Another very interesting moment. Abdusattorov very quickly played knight d1. This is one of those positions where white can actually entertain the idea of the classic Sicilian knight sacrifice on d5. So black takes, and that knight doesn't have a great square to go to. I mean, if it goes back here, then rook a7, queen d4. I mean, this looks quite scary. Is the king really going to go to the king side? I don't know. You know, this is already a threat to take here. And if the knight goes to a5, then the knight returns to the centre. This knight on a5 looks very odd indeed. And this knight, you know, has potential to come to these squares, and maybe just b3, pushing this one. And as I said, that knight on a5 is actually quite vulnerable. So I think knight d5, well, let's just say very dangerous. Okay, so the knight came back to d1 and rook a8. And after this, it seems to me that black is very comfortable. So pressure on the queen side has been cleared up. In fact, black can take the initiative. I think the queen looks really good on this side of the board. And again, I'm not sure where white's play is coming from here. f5, I don't think gets anywhere. In fact, it would give the knight a beautiful square on e5. So knight d2. Understandably, Abdusattorov wants to exchange off the knight. And now Sarana sees his chance to take the initiative. He plays bishop d8. So in my Kalashnikov book, and my chessable course as well, I called this the bad bishop bounce. So the bishop bounces off the back rank and usually over to b6 to attack the white king on g1. In the Kalashnikov, very often there's a pawn on f2 and then you can get pressure there. But it's a really tasty idea. Now at the moment, of course, that bishop isn't covered. But if it does get a chance to get to that diagonal, you can see that, I mean, white's king position is so drafty. So it's a very appealing idea. b3 for black. Whoops. My mouse, oh, there it goes. It's actually working now. Good. b3. We're just trying to solidify things a little bit. Queen a5. Ah, there we go. Bishop b6 coming. So bishop b3 looks normal to close off this possibility. Bishop e6 hits the rook. I mean, there's no doubt that black has the initiative here. e5. So in fact, Sarana wants to break things open. You know, you can imagine if pawn takes, then knight takes e5 with that knight looking to come to g4. It's extremely dangerous. And if f5, then that knight lands on d4. Queen d2 played. And it's I have to say, I think it's tempting to take here and play bishop b6 check. Because if bishop e3, queen g5, there are all these cross pins. Very nasty. And, well, knight f2, I mean, it's a very drafty position for white's king. But bishop c7 played after round about a quarter of an hour. f5, Abdusattorov is going for it. I mean, I can understand this move anyway. It's, you know, it keeps the king side relatively closed. Although after knight d4, you know, black has pretty good play. That's a beautiful outpost for the knight. In fact, yeah, it's a Trojan horse. See, this is in the Sicilian, you get all these related pawn structures. In the Kalashnikov and the Sveshnikov as well as the Najdorf, you get these pawns very often on d6 and e5. And yeah, in the Kalashnikov course, I call this the Trojan horse. And it's quite menacing. By the way, Abdusattorov could have put the brakes on things with queen d5. And it's probably about equal. But I just think it's very interesting that, you know, he was still being very ambitious here. Knight d4. Played. Bishop f2. So he's making room for that knight to come to e3. And then potentially d5. Rook h5 played. Bit of pressure here once that bishop has moved away. Okay, the queen is defending at the moment, but still. g6. And now bishop d8. Bishop bouncing round. It's very interesting. Exchange on f7. The king is fairly safe here. You can see that knight kind of covers things. Incidentally, I mean, it's possible to take on d4, but black always has compensation because, well, okay, I mean, the obvious one here is, you know, if this is taken, then you can see the power of that bishop coming to b6. So normally it's okay if that knight is exchanged off. So knight e3 played. And here is where I'd like you to think, what is black's best move? So while you're having a think, I shall have a drink of my tea. Cheers. And this think and drink moment is brought to you by Millennium Computers. And I'm very proud to promote their Mephisto Phoenix computer. Experience chess in a whole new way with Mephisto Phoenix. Real wood and high-quality pieces offer an outstanding playing experience. Thanks to innovative piece recognition and LED move display, you can play more comfortably than ever. Simple setup and intuitive operation. Start immediately from any position. Quick evaluation of your game at a glance. Buy now in the Millennium shop. PowerPlay viewers can receive a 10% discount on the Mephisto Phoenix computer and indeed all other Millennium products just by clicking through on the link and putting in the code PowerPlayMephisto. So do have a look at the Millennium website and check out all they have to offer. Now, let's get back to this position. It's really reaching boiling point because black has had the initiative. Black is trying to get somewhere here. The knight, I mean, all black's pieces look really strong. This bishop might bounce out here. It might bounce out, well, where? This is the question. Sarana played bishop g5, which I have to say looks very tempting, pinning the knight, because that knight wanted to get into d5. But it was inaccurate. He should have played bishop h4, and getting rid of that bishop really makes life a bit uncomfortable for the king. So, for example, after bishop takes knight d5, then queen c5. Okay, you can see the diagonal is now vulnerable. And if queen f2, okay, blocking, rook g4, okay, watch out for a big check here. And I don't think the king will be too happy on this square. And in any case, you can see that pawn is vulnerable. So bishop h4 was the move. Did you spot it? Let me know if you did. But bishop g5 played. seems to be dangerous as well, but queen d1 just slides away from the pin, hits the rook, and after the rook goes back, queen g4, and the momentum has shifted again in the game. And that queen is getting pretty close to the king. Queen d8 played. This is move 33, so we're getting close to the time control as well on move 40. Knight d5. Yeah, the queen has had to go back. And you can see that that rook now always has the possibility to come to a1. Rook h6. And bishop takes. Pawn takes. And yeah, this is the moment when rook a1 looks actually very strong indeed. Looking to get down to a7. But this move is also really tempting for white. Just blowing open the middle of the board. And in that way getting the rook in the game. I mean, it's very hard to see how black is going to turn this one around when all of white's pieces are looking good. And now it's black's king, which is suddenly very exposed. But this is very clever. Queen d6. Watch out for a queen coming down here. So queen takes d4. So now Abdusattorov is actually a pawn up. And these pieces look pretty good. But in fact, if black defends coolly, it's still okay. Bishop b7 is the best move. That stops a check here. And also if the queen goes down, then the queen can just take the rook here. So curiously, it's very difficult for white to move those pieces in the middle. If this rook moves, then there's going to be counterplay with the queen coming down here. So black is actually all right in that position. But instead, bishop f6 played, and now a check. Now, this is one of these Indiana Jones moments when which stone are you going to tread on? One of them leads to disaster, one actually saves black. Which one do you go for? King g8 should be played. And after this, in fact, black should be all right in this position. White is still a pawn up, but, you know, after this, queen d8, basically black's king is safe enough. It's hard to get through to attack the king when that pawn is there. And actually, it's white's king that's a little bit vulnerable. You know, there's potentially a check coming down here. So that's good enough for black to hold. But instead, king f8 played. And that is a disaster. Knight takes. Oh, by the way, if a check here is played, then bishop d8 blocks. So that's why the knight eliminates the bishop first. And if rook takes, that's going to be checkmate on e8. So queen d1 check. The king steps up. In fact, the king can escape. The checks are always going to be blocked here. First glance, you might think, well, maybe black is all right here. But bishop d5 is an absolute killer, threatening queen e7 mate. And after this check, rook e3, and there are no sensible checks here. It's game over. Yeah, by the way, if queen takes d5, that's a very attractive mate on e8. So rook g6 check. I mean, that can just be taken actually, but Abdusattorov gets a bit flashy. He just marches his king through. Bishop f3. No more sensible checks. Okay, Sarana is determined to keep checking. Okay, that's a rook in the bag. And the king just marches through. And that was the final position here. Sarana resigned. Yeah, you can give another check, but king b6 is obviously absolutely fatal with white a rook up and this bishop dropping, and yeah, it's game over. White's king is safe. I thought it was a fascinating game, the way it kind of ebbed and flowed. And Abdusattorov took enormous risks in going for a win in that game, as did Sarana. I mean, I have a feeling Sarana at a certain point must have felt, well, the game is going my way. But yeah, that, our think and drink moment, that's when things started to turn. Bishop g5, allowing the queen in. And Abdusattorov was back in the game. But bishop h4 was the move, exchanging off that bishop. Now, that win, of course, helped Abdusattorov. But Gukesh won as well, as did Pragg. So, with 3 rounds to go, we've got Gukesh on 7.5. He scored a nice, very convincing, quick win over Varmadam. Abdusattorov on 7. Praggnanandhaa on 6.5. He defeated Fedoseev, who's back on 6. So it seems to me that Gukesh, Abdusattorov, Praggnanandhaa, the winner is going to come from one of those 3 players. Just 3 rounds to go.